Hey Exiles, Wishmonger here. I just wanted to showcase a little bit and give you guys a build guide from my new build in 3.9, Curse of the Allflame. I've been playing this build for many leagues now, basically since Sanctum. I've been gatekeeping essentially. This is a 0-button auto CoC build. I don't have to press anything. The build is slightly stronger if you do press things though, so I do suggest you. But if you wanted it to be full walking simulator, this works. I will preface this by saying the build is extremely expensive. Do not expect this build to be cheap. I have played it with cheaper options and done it cheaper, but it's just not as fun and it's a lot squishier if you don't have it. I am using a Mage Blood, yeah, this is not a league starter. Don't treat it as such. I do think it's, probably my favorite walking simulator build. It's much better than the other ones. Because mainly you don't have to do any math for this. But I can, go over that in the full build guide. So the main auto bombers that we have are, cast when ward, and they all have to do with ward and taking damage. A lot of them use the heartbound loop ring to take damage and then make sure that it doesn't break. And you have to be at a specific armor thresholds to make sure that you don't actually fail. Right? You have to worry about the cooldown recovery. There's a lot of things you have to worry about and a lot of things you have to math out. And there's a lot of breakpoints you gotta know, but this build ignores all of that. The main reason why is that GGG actually changed the Hidden Blade. This in 3.22, Unseen Strike no longer has a 0.5 second cooldown. Essentially, what that meant is that it took away it as a cooldown, and cooldown no longer works, right? So that's essentially the main reason why we don't use the Saboteur for the 30% cooldown. It's because it doesn't even work for a Hidden Blade, right? And that's like the main benefit. We don't have to worry about whether or not it actually have our cooldowns correctly. And this timer from the cast on crit is 0.15 seconds. It, is essentially independent from the Hidden Blade striking, so don't worry about it. Don't do the math. This build is easier than that. So even if you had a bunch of cooldown, it doesn't make Unseen Strike hit more than 0.5 seconds. And it's also good because the map mod doesn't affect it either, right? There's some cast on crit builds. If you have the map mod that increases cooldown recovery rate, their build kind of gets like messed up because of all the math involved. It gets like all the breakpoints and everything gets muddled. So the good thing about this build is it doesn't matter. You do not have to worry about breakpoints. So the main interaction is the Hidden Blade and phasing, right? It says trigger level 20 Unseen Strike every 0.5 seconds with phasing. So there's two essential ways in the game to have permanent phasing. One of them is using a Mage Blood with the Quartz Flasks. The other is using a Watcher's Eye with a Haste aura, right? Haste and phasing. This isn't super expensive, but I personally don't want to use Haste because it's an extremely expensive aura, and that takes away reservation from your other defensive auras. But that's the main reason. I will say one of the worst things about this build is that it is annoyingly loud. So in your hideout, even though nothing is happening, the Unseen Strike is still going and you can hear the little bounces in the background. So generally, yeah, you can either take it off or weapon swap. But that is the main interaction, right? As long as you have phasing, you will have Unseen Strike every 0.5 seconds. There are other methods that you can use. For example, before we used to have the Raider that just automatically had phasing. I did play it like that back in the day, but we don't have that anymore. Other ways you can get it is through some weird boots and some other interactions and like on-kill effects. You can also technically use Phase Run, but I don't like Phase Run because if you accidentally use a skill, your Phase Run stops and you lose your phasing and then using your Unseen Strike. So those are essentially the two options, right? The haste is the cheaper version. Using the flask is the more expensive version. You can also use Tides of Time if you don't have a Mage Blood. Using Tides of Time to just constantly get the flask charges. You have to fiddle with a bunch of things just to make it so that you can always have that flask up. But that is another option if you don't want to, if you don't have the money for Mage Blood. But again, don't use this build if you don't have a Mage Blood. In my opinion, it's too expensive for that. So the other benefit that I would say is you don't have to worry about attack or cast speed, because this is specifically, always every 0.5 seconds. You don't have to worry about attack speed at all, and you don't have to worry about your cast speed. So those are two, mods that are completely irrelevant, and so you should not worry about them at all in your build. Alright, so next, let's go over the options for skills. I tested a lot of skills again because I've been playing this build for a long time. The three that I think are the best is Rolling Magma, Ethereal Knives, and Soul Rend of Reaping. Soul Rend of Reaping, it's mostly really good just because there's a 4% energy leech with it, and because of that, it can help you with your sustain if you have a lot of problems with your sustain, especially with the leech nodes from the assassin. So that's one option you can do. You can also technically go the poison route with this, because assassin also is really good with poison. But that would be, one of the options that you can have. Alright, so the other option you have is Ethereal Knives or any type of physical spell. I would say Ethereal Knives is the best one. So one of the coolest interactions with Unseen Strike is, if you can look at right now, my spirit charges are not going down. So I'm using Light Poacher and the Abyssal Jewel Sockets with Replica Shroud of Lightless and, the boots, the Bubonic Trail. This is also a really good option. You can essentially fit in another aura, because Bubonic Trail can also get 24% increased reservation efficiency if you're using a unique jewel. And this one's a really strong option because, again, you can get essentially a bazillion fizz as extra element from Light Poacher for every spirit charge, and Unseen Strike will not use them up. However, every time you cast like your Flame Dash or whatever, that generally will use up your spirit charges, as you can see. But you can just continually stack them. If you do grab the spirit charge, you do need to get Charge Mastery. You need to get the Charge Mastery over here to have increased durations of charges to help keep your spirit charges up. So I will say, the other really big problem with Ethereal Knives and going the Fizz and the Spirit Charges route is that the pieces itself are kind of bad in general. For example, this is the Evasion Energy Shield, but it's pretty weak. Same with the boots. And the other weird thing is that Light Poacher is a Armor ES helm, but all the other pieces are Evasion ES. It's a little weird. I don't know why they didn't make this also Evasion ES. It kind of would have been a little bit better if all of them were, so you can use some like masteries over here. But I don't know why they chose to make it a armored ES, but that's up to the developers. The biggest thing you can do though is you can have a lot of the jewels, and they can just make up for a lot of stats that you are missing. Because you are sacrificing a lot of stats for these jewel sockets. You technically can use a lot of jewels to just make up for all the lack of stats that you have, right? A lot of them was like, if I had extra crit, evasion rating, give me some more life. A lot of my jewels, they had a lot of, they were just making up for a lot of the stats that I lacked. But even then, it's still a lot squishier. So I wouldn't do Ethereal Knives. I think that single target is also a little bit weaker. Because the problem is that it depends on how often the hidden blade actually hits the boss. And then if it doesn't hit the boss, sometimes you don't send out your Ethereal Knives and then it stops. Whereas at least for Rolling Magma, it bounces multiple times. So even if you miss on your hidden strike, you're still doing a bunch of damage and you're still hitting the boss a lot. So I will say, in my opinion, Rolling Magma is the best out of all of them. I played a lot of different ones. You can also technically use a non-projectile skill, but because Hidden Blade is a projectile skill, and it was kind of the only reason why I'm also using only projectile skills to cast out. But you could probably use like Void Sphere or some other weird spell. But personally, I would rather use a projectile spell. The original intent of this build was I was just trying to do kind of a Voltron type of build with all the tier 0 uniques. Originally, it was back in Sanctum, right? So Original Sin was just introduced, and same with Nimbus. And I was trying to use a Nimbus, Original Sin, Mage Blood, and a Squire, just have like every single tier 0 unique combined together to make a cohesive build. And it kind of worked, right? Back in Sanctum, they didn't because Nimbus, just first came out. The best one was to use was Spark, because when Spark returns, it like refreshes its duration. So that was probably the best build. But they nerfed that and took that away, so we don't have that anymore. But I would say out of all the spell options that I've used over the years, I would say Rolling Magma is by far the strongest. And this patch, they actually buffed it, right? They nerfed the early game of Rolling Magma, but they actually buffed the end game of Rolling Magma. And yeah, I would say it's the best skill to use. Alright, so next, let's go over Ascendancy. So I'm using Assassin, right? And then for return, I'm grabbing from the Saboteur. I'm gonna use the Shrapnel Specialist. But the only reason why is because we do have Shrapnel Specialists. You can technically play it as a Saboteur and then grab one of these, probably Unstable Infusion instead. But I think it's much better to do Assassin. That and Shrapnel Specialist isn't very expensive. If you use another Ascendancy, you do have to use Nimbus, right? And Nimbus is like 80 Divines right now, so also a ring slot, so I don't know if you want to, but that's also an option you can use, right? I played this build as an Inquisitor before, and you do have to use Nimbus. Maybe if you were playing Ethereal Knives and doing, every single element damage, probably Nimbus would be better, and Inquisitor would be better. But otherwise, I would say Assassin is the best with Shrapnel Specialist, mostly because it's cheap. Let's check it right now. Shrapnel Specialist. So yeah, I'm pretty sure Shrapnel Specialist, yeah, is like 2 Divines for the red one, and 1 Divine for the blue one, right? Yeah, they're extremely cheaper than Nimbus. So this build's already expensive. So yeah, if you can afford a Mage Blood, you can afford a Nimbus. But I would say that is another option you can have. I did play it before with a Pathfinder to have to replace a Mage Blood instead of using, a Mage Blood for the flasks. But I also didn't like it as much. Poison Prolif with Soul Rend on a Pathfinder with the flash charges and everything and Tides of Time. That's an option too. But personally, I would say Assassin is the most flexible, and it's also, again, one of the cheaper ones. You can also play it as an Elementalist with Golems to help you with your crit, and it also helps with mana sustain. But again, you would need Nimbus. So if you want to play with Mage Blood and Nimbus instead of Assassin, you can also use those other ascendancies instead. Elementals is really good because it helps you with exposure for all the elemental skills, and you can get Golems for defense. The Inquisitor is mostly just for the crit and the crit pen. So, for Assassin, I went with Unstable Infusion, Mystical Infusion, Death Marked, and I am using From Below. So I am also using the new Abyss Jewel, Reclaim Malevolence. This is an extremely expensive jewel. You can look up Subtracton's video to figure out how you can find a jewel for you. He built a website and everything, so you should check him out if you want to try to use the Reclaim Malevolence jewel. It's not 100% necessary on the build, but it was some of the new things that I was trying out. So that was the main reason why I was playing with the Reclaim Malevolence, was because this new Ascendancy. I will say though, if you don't use this, this is how I did it in the previous leagues. So in all the previous leagues, I used to get these 2 points right here. So life and mana on hit, and Clever Thief, because it gives you, attack leech as mana, and also it has 5% of leech is instant from the leech mastery. So I used to use that because Unseen Strike still counts as an attack, and even though it doesn't do enough damage, it still does like what 5,000 damage right now, and that 5,000 damage is enough to leech your mana and basically count as mana on hit, and that essentially fixes all your mana, right? So technically, I don't need to use From Below, but I'm also using Bladefall Atrathis as my 6th link in my chest, so that's the main reason why I am using it, and it was new, so I wanted to play around with it. But if you don't, again, if you don't use From Below, because this is like a 80 divine jewel, definitely you have to have the Clever Thief and life instant leech. The problem with using jewels, there's a lot of jewels that also give you fizz as mana. That's another method you can use instead of using Clever Thief. But those are only fizz damage. Where sometimes if you're using like Ethereal Knives, you want to convert your fizz into other elements. Just to do more damage, like especially with like Elementals and Inquisitor. If you convert that damage, your Unseen Strike will also be doing non-physical damage, and that part is not leeched. And because it's not leeched from the jewels, that's why you kind of want to use Clever Thief, because it's all attack damage leeches mana. But that's the other way that you can fix your mana. If you're not using From Below, you would also have to grab the Life Mastery for skills cost life instead of 15% mana. You would have to have both your jewels, both your rings have non-channeling skills have -7 to total mana. I don't actually need this on this ring, but you know, you can totally put that on both your rings, and hopefully, you should have enough mana sustain with just Clever Thief and a little bit of Instant Leech. I will say one of the benefits for Assassin is that this node right here is actually extremely strong. The 3% leech as instant per maximum power charge is extremely strong. You're gonna most likely use power charges stacking anyway. Like if you're an Elementalist or if you're gonna be a Inquisitor, that's one of the easiest way to get crit. Um, and if you're using a bunch of power charge stacking, uh, the other problem with this jewel is that it takes away your historic jewel slot, and you can't use Inner Conviction with the power charge stacking, right? A lot of people, they use Inner Conviction with power charge stacking, and they use a Relikesh's Boots. So that combination is really strong, and that's one of the things you give up if you're using Reclaim Malevolence. But Reclaim Malevolence is really good in the fact that like you just don't have to worry about mana at all. I will say that previous builds of mine, I was using Cyclone. I just had like another 6th link in my chest. You don't have to do it that way, but I did a 6th link in my chest. I think for Elementalist, I did a bunch of golems instead in my chest. But last league, I was also an assassin, and I used a Cyclone cast on crit just to have like double the amount of casts on crits. But that one doesn't really work very well with From Below because this From Below only works on spells, and Cyclone still has a cast on it, and Cyclone will still make you use mana, but then you can't because of From Below. So that's one of the things that you gotta worry about if you use this keystone or ascendancy. But it is actually, in my opinion, one of the best. Mostly because I am using Bladefall Atrathis with it, and this essentially is also free. So it's basically I can get another free 6th link in here. But for Bladefall Atrathis, I'm using it mostly as a support. Like I'm putting in Overcharge and like Coursing Currents in there just to get some shock and chill. But you can kind of do whatever the hell you want. This is essentially a free 6th link that you can pick and choose and do whatever you want with it. Alright, so next let's go over the gem links, right? So again, this is the Hidden Blade with the Squire. So these gems that I'm stocking in my shield and the squire, they are transferred over to the hidden blade. And it's going to be cast on crit, rolling magma, increased critical damage, greater volley, increased critical strikes, and slower projectiles. So I don't really need to use greater volley. You can use GMP or greater volley, but greater volley has a slightly smaller, less projectile damage multiplier. So that's the main reason why you would use it. Also, the volley versus GMP doesn't really matter when you're using return and shrapnel specialist or Nimbus, because it fires it in random directions. So that's the only reason why we're using greater volley instead of GMP. The other thing though is we also have to use slower projectiles. Slower projectiles is extremely important because it allows the rolling magma to uh, hit multiple times. The problem with rolling magma is even though I have 10 chains, it almost will never hit 10 chains because it hits a wall or something, and then after it hits a wall, it will only bounce one and it counts it as the final return. So for rolling magma, you probably don't need this many chains, but you know, I like it. It's a little bit more fun in my opinion. But those are the gem links for the main cast on crit. On my helm, I have Discipline, Flesh and Stone, Grace, and Enlighten. For my 6th link, I went over that, but you can pick whatever you want. I used to also use a like Culling Strike and Innervate setup just to give a little bit of extra damage. I have Arrogance linked with Precision and Vitality, and then I have my Flame Wall. Flame Wall is also pretty important because it gives you a little bit of extra damage. I don't know if the multiple bounces of Rolling Magma can go through a Flame Wall multiple times, but it is significant, and you can see that Flame Wall does increase your damage by a lot. And then I also have Flame Dash and Assassin's Mark. Assassin's Mark is because sometimes the Assassin's Mark you get from Death Marked, it doesn't work sometimes. Like sometimes you hit a unique enemy, it puts the mark on them, and then like you forget that it's there, or like you know it was like an ice wall type of monster and it just like ran away from you, and then it doesn't refresh this Assassin's Mark onto a new target that you're using. So in order to do that, you can just I have a manual Assassin's Mark just to keep that on the exact same target or my new target. So yeah, that's the items I'm using. I am using an Ashes of Stars for the 30 quality to increase the amount of bounces and chains I get from rolling magma. Right. The other thing I'm using specifically is I am using follow through. I'm really sad because they did nerf this about like 2 leagues ago. Otherwise, you would just grab a bunch of follow throughs and it would increase the damage for each remaining chain by a bunch. The other important mastery here is projectile mastery because it also increases the amount of chains. If you're using Ethereal Knife, you would switch this over to the more projectile speed because you need a lot of projectile speed for Ethereal chains to return. But yeah, those are my the main gem links for my rolling magma. Alright, next let's go over sustain. So I already went over mana sustain, right? Like I'm using the reclaim malevolence and from below for mana sustain. The other sustain is mostly from Deathmarked. I don't know if you noticed in the videos and the showcase earlier, but like my life and ES, like they can bounce up and down really quickly. And because of the instant leech, as long as I'm not one shot, essentially I can heal back up to full instantly. That is one of the benefits of rolling magma over ethereal knives, is because as it keeps on bouncing, I just keep on getting more and more leech. And you know, one cast of rolling magma can give me a lot of leech. Whereas for ethereal knives, it does proc and it just shoots out, and after that, it doesn't have any lingering effects. Whereas rolling magma, it can compound and just constantly keep on hitting to give you a lot of life and mana. This is my Watcher's Eye. You can ignore the Hatred Fizz convert. It is gain 21 life per enemy hit, affected with Vitality, and gain a flash charge when you deal critical strikes with precision. Essentially lets me have a 5th unique flask, always up. I'm right now using a Taste of Hate. If you use Progenesis or Wine of the Prophet, that'll probably be better. Probably Progenesis is the most defensive option. Wine of Prophet's fun, but you also, I felt like when I did it before with Wine of the Prophet, I proc Wine of the Prophet too often, and because it procs too often, you don't get the effects for very long. Like, it will just cycle through, and because you just keep on hitting with your crits and you keep on getting flash charges, it will just keep on going through the Wine of the Prophet charges, and like you'll just keep on picking random and new ones, and you don't actually get the buff for that long. Um, but I would say, Progenesis is probably the better one to use, especially for defensive measures. But most of our sustain is from Death Marked and the 3% leech, right? So I have 8 power charges on this character, so it's 24% of my leech is instant. It's extremely powerful. I am using not Cross. I'm using Doriani's Lessons for the life and the vitality for the life, and I have a flask charge for the spell leached as energy shield. So that's essentially how I keep my sustain up. Alright, this video has gone on long enough. So lastly, let's just go over my Scorch and exposure setup. So I'm using Flame Sight right now with maximum power charges, but the important part is the 41% chance to Scorch enemies. So if you look at it right now with a maximum power charge implicit, these are extremely cheap. 7C. You technically don't need the second implicit, but I just have it there for fun. But yeah, that's the main one I'm using. This Elemental Mastery I grabbed just to get the exposure inflicts at least negative 18% to the effective resistance, and then I'm getting my exposure through Corrosive Elements. You could technically get it on the gloves itself, but you don't need to. This glove was pretty expensive. This was about, I think, 30 divines. I don't really even need it. I'm only using it because I'm using Bladefall at Trathis and I needed conversion somehow. But this is completely unnecessary. You don't need to go conversion if you don't have Bladefall at Trathis. But this, can give you a nerve, and you can also get fire exposure on hit with the implicits. So you technically don't need corrosive elements. But the other thing I'm using on my boots, you can see that I'm using Aspect of Solaris. So the Aspect of Solaris is from the new Ducat right here, the Brine Hooks Ducat. It gives you a random Pantheon aspect. Essentially what I did was I just did the trade search for a boots with an open suffix, and I just put the Brine Hooks Ducat and just pray that I got the correct one. This actually was my second attempt, because the first one I did actually it bricked and it didn't give me Aspect of Solaris. But Aspect of Solaris is pretty interesting. I think Dreamcore went over he has a whole video on the Aspect of Solaris because it's really strong. I don't have increased duration on it or any skill effect duration, so mine's just a generic one. But it's a really good way to increase the exposure that we have on our enemies. Probably works a little bit better if you're an elementalist, but I think it's enough and fine for what I'm doing, especially because I'm using Scorch. Generally, for most enemies, I can get Scorch up to about 30%. But yeah. That's essentially the build. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's not exactly a boss killer, but we can probably try. This video has gone on long enough, so I hope you guys enjoy. Let me know if you guys have any comments or questions. This is a very complicated build. It is very expensive. It sucks up a bunch of currency and gives you not a lot of return. But, it's one of the benefits of being 0 buttons, right? I can just literally just run around and I don't have to do anything. And, I'll still be able to clear and do a bunch of map progression, alright? But that's all for now. Take care, guys.